Welcome back, Rocky Road family. Today we have a guest who I can already tell is going to be a wonderful addition to the Rocky Road family. We have our new friend, Damian White. He is a poet, he is an author, and he has an awesome story, and we can't wait to talk to him. So, Damian, I want to give you the floor for just a second and introduce yourself and give me just a really quick, who are you?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this the entire day, and it's at the end of the day, so it's a great little nightcap for me for today. So I'm a writer from Columbus, Ohio. I was born and raised here. I went to college in North Carolina at Davidson College. Most people know that for Stephen Curry, the basketball player. So that's usually my little entree into like where my school was. It's in a tiny little city outside of Charlotte. So I wrote a poetry book, and the reason why I'm here is to share kind of the story and journey that I took to get to the book coming out. I actually ended up being homeless twice over the last 7 years. And in 2015, the most serious time, I was homeless in San Francisco for 3 months. And so that kind of experience, having gone from being at one of the most prestigious universities for grad school after college, and then dropping out of grad school and working, kind of not working out, and then falling to like the lowest of my low. That was the catalyst for me to write the book. And so for me now, it's important to share with people the thoughts, the feelings, the situations, the experiences that kind of came along with me being homeless, and kind of just refiguring out my identity as a person who's like trying to maintain your own self-respect and worth and dignity after kind of falling from grace in a sense. So that's why I'm here to talk to you.
Excellent.
That's awesome. I'm excited. Let's hear it. First question I guess I would have would be, what was your upbringing like? What was your childhood like? What brought you to that place? Being a PhD student is no joke. So kind of like bring us up to, in a minute or two of what got you to that place.
Yeah, so I would say that the best way to describe my upbringing was like my back felt against the wall in a sense, where I felt like I was trying to escape for most of my childhood. So I grew up in a single parent household. My parents were divorced when I was 7, and that was very challenging for me for lots of reasons for lots of years. And I think that I grew up in a house with my mom, my aunt, my grandma, and my brother, and not a huge house, obviously. And we were, I would say, like lower middle class. So I never was going hungry or anything like that. But I felt that there was a bit of a pressure on my back to pull myself and everyone else out of that situation. So I had to be the best student, and I had to think that like getting the good grades and graduating from the good school was going to get me the good job that was going to make me Superman and save everyone. And so I was a regular kid in the sense where I played in the band, I played in the jazz band, I played saxophone, and I played flute.
Nice.
I learned how to play music on violin. So from almost all of my schooling, I played music. I also just like played sports. I wrestled. I played rugby. Um, but there was always this side that I knew that I had to let the academics like shine, and I just
Mm.
felt like that pressure on myself, whether it was just from kind of like me adopting that idea just from everything going on, or people saying like, "Hey, you should be a doctor, and you got to do this, and you got to do that, and you got to buy your mom a house, and you got to do this," and like I felt a sense of pressure. Um,
Did
so
you put that on yourself, or do you feel like someone expected that from you, or is that just you saying, okay, I hear this a lot from kids who were the only boy or the oldest son saying, okay, now I'm the man of the house now, and it's my job to figure it out.
Yeah, well, I think I felt like the man of the house since I was 7. And
Mm-hmm.
so it just felt like at the time when I was
Mhm.
18, after 11 years of feeling that way, now you feel like you can actually go. The only way to do something in my mind was like to go to school and get a degree so I could get the job that pays me $100,000 or whatever they say you're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to make, and I definitely put the pressure on myself. I won't say like I had like a super strict mom where she was like on my back about my grades. I was already kind of a self-motivated student, so I
Mhm.
wanted to bring home the good grades. I had like one of those families where like I got $20 for an A and like $10 for a B, and so to me it was like a fun little game I played in school. But definitely more me than everyone else.
If you're more like me too, you probably were harder on yourself than other people were on you.
Oh yeah, like I was
Yeah.
definitely my biggest critic, and it's just like
Yeah.
I think for most of school, like it's like the parents. There are these memes that were going around a couple years ago where the parent was like, the kid came home with like a 3.9, and the dad was like, "Where's the other point one?" You know, like I
Mm,
was that was me though. Like I was that for
Uh-huh.
myself, and I feel
wow.
like I was kind of policing myself in that way where I was making standards and expectations for myself that were hurting me emotionally and spiritually and
Mm.
physically because I was putting the finish line so far every time. I wanted to plant the
Mhm.
flag even further, and I never really stopped to like realize what that was doing to me or if it was really what I wanted. I think it just felt like the
Mhm.
right thing to do in order to get the thing I thought I expected from myself.
Mm.
I can totally relate to that. My goodness. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So then you went to what did you go to undergrad for?
I went to undergrad for sociology, and then
Okay.
I presumed I was going to be a professor. So
Sure.
that field, it doesn't necessarily get you into all the greatest jobs. You know, I feel like if you want to be a sociologist, it's great. That means you're going to be, go to the university, be a professor, and like write papers and write
Mhm.
books. Or you can go work in the nonprofit sector in certain places, like some NGOs or nonprofits, which is what I did. I went to work for a nonprofit right after I left grad school, but there weren't. It's not like economics where it's like I could go and do a bunch of other consulting jobs or start my own little finance firm or anything like that. So I had
Yeah.
to really figure out like what do I do now because
There's
the
not a really
path
clear path.
there was no longer a clear path.
Mm.
Yeah, that's interesting. So then you went to undergrad and then you said you were in grad school when you became homeless. Was that the first or second time?
That was the first time.
Okay.
So that was the first. After I left grad school, I had like $1,000 or something, and I decided to drive across country to go stay with a friend who was my girlfriend at the time, and
Mhm.
um, that money runs out obviously, and then
Mm.
I didn't know what my ambitions were, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and so like our relationship and friendship strained, and then that ended, and so like
Mhm.
now I'm kind of like left out in the street trying to figure it out. And I had a stubbornness in a sense, I guess I would use that word now, that I just didn't want to ask for help or go back home. I just
Mhm.
refused to go home. I think that because I had built my identity for so long on getting away from home and maintaining a certain independence, that
Mhm.
once I was out there, I didn't feel like any proper route could end back at home.
And
And
I'm sure
so,
for yourself, based on what you're just really describing, you having this sense of these high achievements that you need to reach, I'm sure there had to have been a sense of failure, thinking that you couldn't go home. If you went home, you failed and you didn't succeed at getting that job in that house that you had set out to get for so many years.
yeah. And then you have to also, I had to realize I had been fake for a long time. Like
Mm.
Mm.
I wanted to do all the things that were going to look good to other people. And so my identity was built on that to them. And then when I
Mm.
was no longer any of that, the guilt and the kind of disappointment and embarrassment that made me not want to be near those people anymore. It made me want to isolate myself and make sure I wasn't around them because I didn't want them to see me that way then,
Right.
Mhm.
So from then till now a lot has changed, but back then I wanted to be just a hermit. I wanted to be by myself. I wanted to be alone.
Did you
Mhm.
feel like you had any you talked about identity, did you feel like you had anything that you felt was really true to you at that point, or was your entire identity being the person that you thought other people expected you to be?
It was still that, I think, and I think it was. I like music, and I was making music, kind of as a hobby
Mhm.
at that time, and I wasn't sure that I could like do it full time because, again, like I rap, and so you're talking about like somebody who was going to stand in front of students and like deliver lectures, and then
Mm.
that person is now telling people that they left grad school and they're going to start rapping, right? And so for
Mm.
me at the time it felt like an impossible hill to climb if it was something I was
Mm.
going to do actually try to do. Like telling
Mhm.
people that just wasn't an option. So it was just very challenging because I wanted to live kind of freely, but I also needed to be alone. I needed to shelter myself from kind of the judgment and the perception that I thought everyone was going to have of me because of my
Mhm.
change in status, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It absolutely does make sense, and I think it's I'm really glad that you are I'm going to jump to the question instead of giving my thoughts, but I would love for you to speak into the choice of a lot of people think that homeless isn't a choice. Homeless is because people don't love them or don't care for them. And I know people in my personal life who've made the choice and who have family and friends that do love them very much. And so I know that's a stigma and I know that's an incorrect assumption that people have, that to be homeless, you're not loved and you're not supported in your life. So I'd love for you to speak into that a little bit.
Yeah, my mom would probably love to hear this.
Mm.
Like my, everyone wanted me to come home. My mom
Hmm.
offered to give me plane tickets and drive all the way to Florida with the first time I was homeless, and California the second time I was homeless. And there was just like I threw my phone in the ocean. I literally wanted to
Hmm.
disconnect. And
Mm,
um, the crazy part is that it's hard to tell people that you choose that.
Hmm.
It's hard to
mm,
tell people. It's hard for people to conceptualize because I don't think most people are in tune necessarily with the things that are killing them slowly, you
mm,
know? So for
yeah.
me, a lot of that pressure was caving in on my chest. Every day I felt it caving in. And I think that at the moments when I could have chosen to go home and I said no, there was still more work to be done internally for me to like feel like I could come back home the person that I set out to be. Like it was
Mm,
like I was homeless in California for 3 months, and had I come back in month two, then there would have still been some stuff I hadn't worked out. And then I
mm,
don't know what I don't know what happens then. You
Hmm.
know, I had to be literally scared to near death. That's when I came home. And had
mm,
that not happened, then I don't know. Maybe I would have still felt like I could live life a little more dangerously. Maybe I would have
sure.
still felt like I had more questions I could, maybe I kind of felt like an explorer. I felt like Lewis and Clark out there in a sense where like I'm figuring me out, I'm figuring the world out. And it doesn't,
Mm-hmm,
at the time, it doesn't feel how it looks.
mm-hmm,
It looks terrible, but it doesn't feel that way. I didn't have any bills. I didn't have any
Hmm.
phone. I didn't have any social media. I didn't have any
Hmm.
friends to keep up with. So like I was just
mm-hmm,
doing me literally, and
Hmm.
it was amazing. That part of it,
Hmm.
mm-hmm,
and I had to be able to balance that and understand that, because now when people ask me about it, I don't have to sit and talk about it as some miserable, awful experience that like I regret, that like I could have avoided. I couldn't have.
Hmm.
I don't, and I wouldn't have. I wouldn't go back and not do. I wouldn't go back and change it.
mm-hmm,
Hmm. And that's an interesting, it's a perspective shift. Whereas I've had a lot of clients, a lot of interactions. I used to run a group home. In Center City, Allentown, where it was basically the first step out of incarceration, trying to get people with mental health and comorbid issues back into their homes, into their lives. And a lot of them quite literally would try to escape from the group home where we had heat and running water and therapy and food and anything they could possibly need, because they missed their friends in the homeless community that were right outside the doors that we were at. And it was an interesting thing where, for me, I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. So you have every material need that you could need. You have access to your family, you have access to healthcare. And you're like, yeah, but I really miss that feeling. And I really miss being out. That's what they would say, is I miss being out with my
Yep.
family, with my friends.
Yeah, for me, it was very strange because once you're there long enough, it starts to feel like your community. It starts to
Hmm.
feel like your friends. You start to feel like people you see every day. It's the same as like your new coworker. You just get a new job, and these are your new coworkers. Random people you've never met right now. But as soon as you've been working there for 3 months, now it's like you guys are getting lunch together. You know that their dog's
Hmm.
name is Toby, and that their kids do gymnastics, and you know all this stuff. And it's the
Hmm.
same out there. You have nothing but time to be with each other and hang out or do whatever you guys are doing.
yeah.
And so it feels weird when you go away because you feel like you lost a friend, but it's just not the same.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And I think it's interesting too of what you're saying is when you're in it, you don't feel like what the outside world in a way sees it as. A lot of us are told, and there's homeless shelters, people that are cold, and you think of like what the typical homeless situation is, where somebody's sleeping on a subway vent on the sidewalk in this inner city. Um, but there's all the different types of homelessness where it's like you have a car, so you have something, but do you have the money to run the car, or do you, again, like if you're meeting with people, what are they doing and how are they living their lives? And It's interesting you bring up that sense of freedom because some people in homeless situations may feel that freedom. And
I
it's
felt the same thing that people feel when they go to the beach and hang out for vacation. Because the
Mm,
mm,
guy sleeping on the vents, looking up at the stars and like the ocean is like, I was in San Francisco, so I'm sleeping places that are some of the most beautiful places in the world,
right.
mhm,
in America, and like that's it's it just wasn't bad in the sense that I think everyone would assume it is, because I'm out there looking at the stars and I'm listening to the water and I'm talking to people and having conversation, I'm learning stuff, and like that is the same reason why people want to unplug and go to Cancun.
mm,
They want to go listen to the water and hear the stars. So I think that for people who are trying to understand that, they have to they have to shed some layers of that onion so that they
Mm,
can really grapple with like what it is, what it feels like to be there. Not what it looks like or what it's stereotyped to be like, but what can you imagine what it feels like? And most
sure.
people can't. Most people can't.
mm. This is gonna sound like a strange question, but do you sometimes miss that unencumbered existence
For
or
sure.
parts of
I,
it?
for sure. And I think that I it's the reason why I still don't have that many friends. I still
Mm,
don't I still don't like go see my mom often as
Mhm,
maybe I should. I see her way
mm,
more now, but like there's
mm,
still parts of me that like that freedom. It's like there I don't even know how to tell this story, but it's kind of funny. Like my mom, I remember going on the phone with her and talking about like it was like right around rent time, and I was like giggling once because I'm like I don't even know what that means. I don't have
mhm,
rent, and like to her that seemed like lack of responsibility. To
mhm,
me, it sounded like a shackle that had been unchained.
mhm,
And so like our perspectives were just different at the time. And like as a rent paying member of society now, I can't tell you this is better all the time.
mhm,
I wouldn't, I'm not, it doesn't mean that I'd wish to be back there, but I can say that I, I learned lessons from that experience that I couldn't have learned if I never escaped the bubble of everything always being okay and
mm,
mm,
everything always being comfortable.
mm. Yeah,
mhm,
so it stretched you out of your comfort zone into a different lifestyle, literally,
Literally.
that you had to figure out and maneuver your way through.
Yeah.
So so being in, obviously we're not here to glorify homelessness. It's not something that we want people to be and to go through. So what took you from that point to actually going home? Like you said, there was a dangerous situation, something that happened the second time you were homeless. Like what made you, I mean, to me, also being another member of society that pays bills, I mean, like thinking could live somewhere without bills does sound great. So, like, what changed that perspective of the homelessness and the homelessness community to no, I need to do this and to become a quote member of society in a way, you know?
Yeah. It ties directly into something I was mentioning earlier. I think that like my safety um, was compromised once I got too familiar.
Hmm.
mm,
So like I got so comfortable that those streets that like I knew not to walk down, those 2 years of living in San Francisco, I started ignoring that, and I started
Hmm.
meeting people there, and I started hanging out there, and those people that like I was kind of scared of in the beginning, like now I want to know what they do, now I want to know who they are,
mm,
Hmm.
and so like there was just a day where I was grabbed by the neck and put up against a fence, and a guy had some sharp, it was night, it was in the evening, he had some
mhm,
sharp object, and I don't know, I'm gonna assume it was a knife, and he was just screaming, I better not have sold my soul for nothing, I better not have sold my soul for nothing. And I was standing there and I heard the clink of the metal on the pavement, and I realized that he had dropped whatever the sharp object was, and when he got off me I just like backpedaled on the ground, and he could have easily just picked up whatever that sharp object was and come back and got me, but I was just a
mhm,
random person walking down the sidewalk. I was walking by the beach at night,
Hmm.
and so that the next morning, when I started to think about it, I realized that like I no longer was in control of my own physical safety. And I
mhm,
Hmm.
had to make a choice because it was at that point where I realized that if I didn't do something, I was going to die in San Francisco.
Hmm.
mm. It's interesting, just the words that you've used. Being a poet, I hope you appreciate this, but you described your childhood as having your back against the wall, and the moment that changed your life, you felt like your back was against the wall, literally.
it's very poetic that you drew that together.
From a poet, I appreciate that. Words aren't always my thing, but I have my shining moments. But it's I kind of my throat just closed up a little bit thinking about that experience for you. Um,
And that's the first time
but
I've told that story.
mm,
I think that there are other stories I've told. You know, I was threatened several times. I was in lots of bad situations and bad car
mhm,
rides and in tents and in places
mm,
and in buildings with people doing things that you don't even want to imagine. And
mm,
so I think that even those things didn't make me go home, but it was the
mm,
moment when I realized that it was just the flat, like the flash of my life was really
Sure.
it literally
mm,
flashed before my eyes, and so that was really transformative. And it took about it was still hard to get home. I didn't have an ID, I didn't have a wallet, I didn't have anything,
mm,
so I had
Mhm.
to work with the San Francisco like public offices to see if they had any programs for me to go home, and they did. They had a Greyhound bus program where if you had someone in your city that would receive you, then they would call them, and if they said yes, they would pay for your Greyhound ticket. So I
that's
rode the Greyhound
amazing.
from San
Oh, wow.
Francisco to Columbus, Ohio, over the course of like too many days.
I was gonna say,
When
how long is that ride?
Sure, yeah.
it was supposed to be 5 days, but the
Wow.
bus broke down somewhere in Texas,
Mm,
and we had to stay there for like an entire day. So I got home like 7 days later, and
Mm.
they only
wow.
give you like $30. So they give you
Oh,
like $30 for the ride to take
Wow.
with you, so you can buy stuff at the gas station or whatever whenever the bus stops. But like $30 for 7 days,
Yeah, that doesn't go
mm,
far at all. It's gone in two.
yeah.
wow.
Oh, so there are, and again, kind of reiterating of what you said earlier, is you don't really realize what you're in at the time. So I'm sure now having the life that you're living now is that's very looks very different than being homeless. You can look back at those moments and say, yeah, that freedom was really great, but those moments in the tent or the moment in the dangerous car ride or the moment that your life literally flashed before your eyes in that moment, that would be the point that you would say homelessness is not a preferred lifestyle.
I don't think it. I don't think there was any point where I'd say it was preferred.
Okay.
I think what I would say is that um, we have to be able to reframe our perspectives to understand that people can experience situations differently.
Mm,
So while there are sure plenty of homeless people that are drug addicts and this and that and this and that, right? Ex felons and this and that.
Mhm.
I met doctors, lawyers, I met teachers, former lawyers, former doctors, who are
mm,
also who are intermingled throughout that community of people. And I think that what it showed me was that like there's a humility that is lost in like corporate America that you have to
mm,
feel there. You have to
Mm.
feel because these are I always think this like if someone was to assume something about me, they could have never assumed my past. They would have never assumed I dropped out of University of Michigan, #1 PhD program in the country, and
mm,
I went to Davidson College and graduated, and I did. They would never assume those things.
Right.
And so like for me, I had to approach everyone like that too. Like I shouldn't assume that I know anything about you just because of where you are. And I've
Mhm.
carried that into like my, once I guess got back into the transition into regular life, like I've carried that with me. And like people say like don't judge a book by its cover, but it's way different. It's
mhm,
Sure.
not that. It's really seeing people for who they are and
Right.
like accepting that and having empathy and like understanding you
mhm,
don't know what's going on inside. I looked perfectly fine to everybody. I was always partying, I was always having fun. I always like looked like I was doing good, but nobody knew that there was just a dumpster fire on the inside.
mhm. I
Right.
think you brought up a really important point too, is that there's more assumptions with homelessness. Is my particular experience happened to be with folks who were incarcerated and they had drug issues, and that's why they were incarcerated. But that's not always the case. You can be clean and sober, and you can have a history of a very successful life. There's a lot of really incorrect assumptions about what leads people down the path that they've been walking down. And so thank you for saying that, because I think even some of our listeners, I can hear the explosions like, wow, former lawyers have it all. No, in corporate America, they look like they might have it all because they have the suits and they have the money and they have the, X, Y, and Z material items. at some point.
Yeah, but they're probably a divorce or a couple paychecks or no clients, months of no clients away from that too. And
Hmm.
Mhm.
most people are, and it's just there's a safety that we feel that we should feel. We should feel the comfort to be able to live each day and like not be worried about being on the streets. Like that's no one should be waking up every day worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that at the same time we have to acknowledge that like life could turn on a dime. And that was my greatest fear before, was that my life could just be pulled, the rug could be pulled from underneath my feet. And it happened. But I brought that, I continued to like think that was possible. And then it happened in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I'm not happy that you were in a life changing or a life altering and life threatening moment, but I think that those terrible pit moments are what lead to the peaks. And I feel like you're heading towards one. You have a book which we didn't actually tell our listeners the title of, and I want to make sure that we support that. So can you talk about your journey towards poetry, which is a beautiful way to tell your story?
Absolutely. So the book is called "I Made a Place for You." It's an illustrated poetry collection. I worked with an Italian artist named Francesco from Livorno,
Great name.
Italy, and he's a great friend of mine. He's a great friend of mine now. But the point of this book was kind of to uncover some of the questions I had about life, spirituality, growing up, becoming a man, becoming a better person, appreciating the earth, appreciating family, or understanding some of those things. It was a place for me to, the title "I Made a Place for You" came from me needing a space to actually talk about those things. Because like when you're thinking about like, just imagine the thoughts you have the night after getting almost being stabbed,
Mm,
right? So like one of those, I wrote a poem called Purgatory, and like that poem was inspired by that night because I had the thought like, if that was a real place, like what would,
mhm.
and I would have gone there last night, like how would I have felt there? And like to me, that's not a brunch conversation to have with my friends.
Mhm.
So
Right.
I had to find a way to talk about that and get that out and like get what was inside of me outside. And so poetry has always been the way for me to transform my feelings, thoughts, emotions into something productive. And I've been doing that
Mhm.
since I was young. This is just my first book. I've been writing poetry and doing slam poetry and just supporting poetry forever. I just finally found the gumption, I guess, to make this a real project, make it a real
Mhm.
book. And so my goal for people is to have more questions and answers with these poems. They're supposed to be
Mm,
a tool for digestion. You know, they're not supposed to answer kind of like any of life's big questions, but expose you to some of the questions that maybe we're not asking, or maybe you haven't thought of because you've never been back against the wall and had to wonder what it's like to worry if you're going to die or not be able to see your dad again, or see your, or if you know, for me, like my relationship with my dad isn't the best. So like I knew that I would never get to mend it if that was ever even a thought in my mind. Right. So like how do you reconcile that? And like this was the book for me to kind of start writing my feelings and getting that
mhm.
stuff out. So
Mhm. And that's such a great outlet too, because I think specifically, and you can speak more into this too, obviously, being a male in our society, it's not something that men really want to admit or talk about as emotions or things that they're going through or questions or maybe even a struggle, with our society and American culture of just like men are strong and they can't cry and they can't be tough, they have to be tough all the time. So this is just a really nice outlet for you to be able to express those emotions while also encouraging other people that maybe this isn't an answer, this is just more questions for you to think about. And that's a great tool and a way to process through feelings and emotions and experiences too.
yeah, I think that for any men that don't think that that's important, my motto is to have the full range of emotions. You know, like I allow myself to have the full range of emotions, so I don't have to be the tough guy all the time. I was crying 2 mornings ago, the day after Christmas. My grandmother passed in May. This was my first Christmas
Mhm.
without her, and
Mhm.
I held it together all of Christmas. You know, I told my mom I was
Yeah.
like, I want to cry every 45 seconds on Christmas, but the day after
Mhm.
Christmas, I cried for an hour, and like I felt fine about it because
Mhm.
I also know that I'm the only one that has the has a clue what it looks like when I get to rock bottom.
Sure.
You know, and I got to rock bottom by holding my emotions in. by
Mm,
thinking I'm stronger than all of that,
Mhm.
by not thinking I needed to talk to people and share what was going on. So for me, it's super important now to like have all the feelings. I want to have them all. So I don't
Mm.
live my life according to what it's supposed to look like by other people anymore. So if I'm not a tough guy to you, that's fine, you know.
mhm,
But there's plenty of people who are going to appreciate having someone who wears their feelings in their sleeves, you know, and like is thoughtful. And I feel transparent, you know.
Mm.
I feel trans, and I
mhm,
like to feel that way. I want to
mm,
feel see through. I want you to be able to see through me, and I want you to feel like you're getting the person that like is in front of you. And
right.
I feel like that's manly. You know,
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
Mhm.
for and that's it's human. But I mean, for men who have never heard anything like this before, like that's to me another definition of masculinity that doesn't
Sure.
exist.
Yeah.
And we need more people who like feel.
Mhm.
I
Absolutely.
completely
I
agree.
I in my house, I have this motto. I don't have it written down. I could probably put it on the wall or something. But in my house, I have this motto where all emotions are accepted, but they don't determine the result. So we can allow all emotions to be felt, and I'm okay with any emotion to be felt in my home, and I'm completely open to it. But it doesn't make the decision for what the result is. So, you don't want to make a decision out of anger. You don't want to make a decision out of sadness, honestly. And you don't want
Mhm.
to make a decision out of happiness. But all emotions are allowed here and we can feel all of them and express all of them. But then we come down to like the root of the truth and what that the root of actual truth is what will make the decision in my house. And so that's just like something that, kind of
That's
like
super
reminds me
awesome.
what you're saying about is just like it's okay to feel emotions and it's okay to cry. And there's, even in those moments for you and for me, I was crying the other day too. Like it's a regular thing here. And so it's just accepted. Like it is what it is. And, maybe literally nobody needs to watch, but maybe it just needs to happen. And
Mhm.
that's fine, so I really love that, and I really appreciate that you took those emotions and put that into your poetry, and were able to express that, but to also use that as a springboard for other people to begin to feel emotions and maybe thoughts that they have never even thought about. There's not many people that you'll meet that have had a near death experience. Not a lot.
Mhm.
Some people, maybe a car accident or something, very typical. Sure. And terrifying, absolutely. I am not downplaying that whatsoever. But to literally have a knife up against you or, your life flash before your eyes in a moment that just by happenstance, that knife fell out of that person's hand, that could have been a very different outcome for you. And not many people really have that ability to share that. So that's, really amazing that you can use that experience in your poetry to make others think. So thank you for
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah, and
Mm.
I'm grateful that I have the outlet to do it. You know, I'm grateful that I have thought about what it would feel like if I didn't know what to do with those feelings. You know, and
Hmm.
I don't know. You know, I have no idea. I think it would be very challenging. You know, I've been I've been on antidepressants before, and I went to
Mm.
therapy, and I did all this stuff before. You know, and still felt like I wasn't whole yet. You know,
Mm.
so it wasn't until I got the words right that I felt like I was complete again. So for me, I'm really grateful and thankful that I do have this way to express myself and kind of clear my conscience and have catharsis in like a
Mhm.
productive, positive sense that like I can share with people in a great medium. You know, people like books and they respect
Mm.
books, so it's easy. It's an easy to like to talk about my story now because I have this physical thing that like we all understand. It's not the
Mhm.
same as me kind of just like showing up, be like, hey, let me tell you guys a crazy story. And then everyone looks at you and like they go home and get in the car and they're like, can you believe Damien like was out there like eating out of the trash cans? You know,
Mm.
it's not the same as reading how I wrote it, you know, or how
Mhm.
I'm writing it.
So
The
would
way
you
you're
say
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Would you say the book is for you and your processing, or is it really for the reader to help them process?
I would say that everything that I create is for me and I invite everyone else to share with me.
Hmm,
Mm.
So I
that's
I
wonderful.
I write from a place that's so like the book is the book that I've always wanted to see in the world. I'll start with
Hmm,
that. So if that's the case, then I have to only assume that there's other people that probably wanted to see something similar. You know,
sure.
Mhm.
Absolutely,
maybe
yeah.
they didn't know what it's gonna look like, but for me, I write for me, honestly. And I
Mhm.
think that that's the best policy for me, because then I'm not trying to like craft something that I think is going to be catchy. It's like writing a hit song. You know,
Right.
you're
Yeah.
writing the song because you want it to be catchy and single and the people to sing along. But like, is it are those the words that you really feel?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
it's okay with me if everyone doesn't like. I know some of the language is difficult in the book, but like I wrote it in a way that like it's the language I speak to myself. You
Sure.
know,
Mhm.
it's the language that I understand. It's the language that the stories came out. So I love when people tell me that certain poems resonate with them. But it's the moment of gratification came to me when the book arrived in my hand.
Hmm. And did you write the poems along the way, or did you find an outlet and a time that you were able to sit and actually just really write the book, or were they poems that were written at various points? You said the one purgatory poem was based off of that night
Yeah, but it
that
was
you
after.
shared.
All of it was after.
Okay.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I wrote it all after. I didn't write for a long time when I came home. It was probably a year and a half until I started writing. But I felt really compelled. I felt really compelled, and I
Mhm.
wanted to write all original things. And I had lost everything. I didn't have any more laptops. I didn't have my old notebooks. I didn't have any old
Right.
phones. I didn't
Yeah.
have anything. So I was starting from scratch. And yeah, so all new poems that came after the experiences, and I had spent a long time thinking about how I wanted to tell this stuff. Right,
Mhm.
the hardest part for me was figuring out how to tell the story, right? It's like when you're going to college. At least when I was going to college, my guidance counselor was like, write your essay about coming from a single parent household and tell them the sad story, and then tell them this is why you need a scholarship, and you're gonna write the sad story. Basically,
Mhm.
was what they wanted. The guidance counselors wanted us to do, and so
Right.
I didn't want to do that version of a book.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, listening to you speak about you have such a passionate drive to your voice. There's such momentum when you're speaking about this. You can really tell how excited you are to share your story and share your struggles and share the really shitty, gritty stuff. Um, are you planning on doing any sort of audiobook or slam readings or anything like that so that people can really hear your words and your voice?
So my goal is to so the illustrator has the original paintings for these. So the poems, he drew sketches for each illustration, and then he watercolor painted them, and then he like digitized that and like did all the touches and whatever
Hmm.
magic illustrators do. I'm not not super
Way
sure.
beyond me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Me
way
too.
beyond me too. But the goal, he still has the originals, so the goal is to frame them and take them to art galleries and do readings and signings and tour art galleries would be my big goal. So I could I feel like it's really important for people to read the poems next to the art in this particular book,
Sure.
Mm,
because um the art colors the words. And
mhm,
I know it's kind of poetic, but I mean it literally, in the sense where like my story was colorful, it was scary, and it was bright, and it was trippy, and it was weird. And
mhm,
so I think that like you can't get that necessarily from just the words. So the
mhm,
visual element draws those words into that kind
Hmm.
of like universe where you can start to see the visual representation. And
mm,
so reading these poems has been a struggle because they're short, and I wrote them to be seen with the pictures, with the
Hmm.
illustrations. But I have been writing. I have a lot more poems, and
mhm.
I've been writing some that are just longer, more performance pieces. So I do think that there will be a lot more of that to come for sure.
Hmm.
I
Has
would
there
love to
ever
be on that mailing list, by the way, so let me know when you're gonna be back in the Lancaster or Allentown
Allentown?
area.
I'm really
Um,
trying to pull it off. So hopefully.
Yes.
that's amazing. That's really cool. And I know for me, just in this conversation, I have never actually personally talked to somebody that I can actually remember that has experienced homelessness. And I don't think I've ever met somebody who actually is a poet. Actually, I've met lots of musicians, and people can call musicians poets and stuff too. So I don't know, I'm just learning a whole lot while you're here tonight, which is great. But one of my questions that I also have is, would you ever turn your poetry into rap music? I mean, you said you liked music a lot. Is that something you would want to do?
I do. I do rap, but I don't rap. I
Mhm.
don't my so like it's funny. I'm glad you asked. The music is completely different space for me. The thing about
Hmm.
music
Okay.
that I love, the thing
Mm,
about music that I love is that the words, like with poetry, it has to look a certain way on the page, and each word has to like mean exactly what you want to say. But with music, there's a sound, there's kind of this
Right.
like freedom. And
Mm-hmm.
so the way I write my music, it's much more free in the sense of like, I kind of feel like I don't feel as tethered to the page. And so
Mm.
I use that for different things. I talk about different things. I rap about different things than I write about. And for me, both are like very therapeutic ways for me to exist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I didn't like, I love rap music. Like I've always loved rap music. And like,
Mm-hmm.
that's from everything from like the clean stuff to like the worst of the worst, you know? And like, it's just always been that way. And so like poetry is very buttoned up and very like
Right. Yeah.
armchair. And you go to conferences and you present and you sign books and you do like things like that. But like, there's the other side of me that's like, I like to go to like parties, and I like to go to art galleries, and I like to go see cool stuff, and I like to go to concerts, and I like to, I'm wearing a Basquiat hoodie, like an art hoodie. And like
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I like that kind of stuff too. And so I have to, it's my whole life kind of now is me like making sure that I'm giving myself the creative food I need
Yeah. I
to,
really respect that boundary of saying this is for my input, this is for my output.
yeah.
Not that you're necessarily intentionally doing that, but I think that's what I'm seeing is that this is what feeds me so I can feed myself in another way by providing the words and the stories for other people to then consume, which might feed something. It's a beautiful cycle, really.
Yeah, and like music is cool because there's a faster sense of completion and gratification. Like I can
Mm.
write a song in a day, and I could record it, go to the studio and record it, and I could be done with it and listening to it. But
Mm-hmm.
the book took, I waited for that Amazon order, package for a long time.
You
you
had
know,
to order your own book on Amazon?
no, they sent me an author copy,
Oh,
but it's just like
great.
in like our society, we're so used to like you post something, you get likes. It's like there's an
Yeah.
instant
Sure.
kind of like gratification society. So for me, it's
Mm-hmm.
like I know I'm guilty of that too. So
Mm.
part of that's the reason
Right.
why I like music, because I, even if I don't get to go record at the studio, I can just like record on my phone and listen to it at my
Mm-hmm.
house, and that's amazing. And it's like something I
Mhm.
made and I did, and it feels like a little. I feel like I have a bunch of little secrets.
Sure.
It's like your own little
Mhm.
treasure. It's like your own little treasure chest. And like, that's why I think that when I do get to the point where I finally share something with people, like I'm so happy and comfortable and good with the thing that I made that like, I just want other people. I just want to see if other people want it.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to see if
Mhm.
other people can relate or will like it or is useful. And I feel like being an artist or a writer is a service in a sense. It's like you're part, like you're making stuff, and my job is to get it to people who like need it or want it.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, you're preaching to the choir here, Damien. You have two music therapists. I have moments in my day where I look at my clients having a ball with whatever improv that we're doing, with that whatever we're doing, and I look and I say, "This is my job." And I'm just so humbled to be able to make spontaneous music with people all the time. And there's a beauty to the fact that this happened right now in this moment, and this moment cannot be duplicated by anyone. We can play the same notes, we can sing the same words, we can wear the same clothes, we can do whatever we want to, but it cannot be duplicated. And your brain chemistry can change in that moment. And it's a really beautiful thing. And so I appreciate your appreciation for what you said, those little secrets, those little treasures that you will always have.
Absolutely, it's a super special thing, and you said I'm preaching to the choir, so I won't keep preaching, but I
Oh, you're welcome
We're
to.
here to listen. I'm just saying we completely understand that it transcends words sometimes, the experience and the feeling and the emotion
yeah.
that you can get putting into and getting out of music. No one has really been able to accurately describe it because it's beyond words.
And it's beyond words sometimes, even when the music comes to you. Like it's just sometimes I don't know. Like I feel like my mind is made of music, or my heart's made of music, or my heart's made of words, and like it's I can see how that has been. I can see how, like, from a logical standpoint, how like my life could have led to that being the case. Like I've always listened
Mm.
to, like I've probably listened to more music than like regular people, like I've heard more lyrics than like regular conversation. It seems like my time spent listening to music is incredible. You know, it's a lot over the course of my life, and but I think that like when it comes to you and then you make it, there's just something like it, like you said, it's a very ephemeral feeling that's hard to capture.
Mm-hmm. It's a great word. Yeah, that sounds great. And I think it's really, I was, as you've been sharing more and more, I've been thinking about just your life experience and those, um, almost like you were trying to box yourself in with your expectations, your aspirations, and your goals. And what I'm kind of seeing throughout the journey is you've learned how to free yourself with music and with poetry and illustrations and then having these goals. So, you've been through a rocky road, which is why we have the name of our podcast, and, up and down hills and peaks and pits, which we like to talk about every once in a while. So, what are some things, you talked about your goals with the art gallery and reading poetry there, but what are some positive things? Like, what are things that you're looking forward to with your life and, the goals that you're trying to reach, without, backsliding? And obviously that naturally happens to all of us in our life, but what is something tangible? Like, what are some great things that have happened to you as a result of these really difficult things that you've been through,
Yeah,
aside from your book?
I got to go to Paris last year, in Prague, which was amazing.
Mm.
And I spent 3 days in Paris and 3 days in Prague. And I think that like I've always wanted to go to Italy, and I haven't been there yet. But um, being in those two places just showed me again how much world I would have missed.
Hmm.
Mm.
And so like now my goal is to just experience as much as possible, go try foods I can't pronounce, and go bring back perfumes and colognes that smell like things I've never even heard of before. Like that's like I want to do that. And like
Yeah,
those, even the thought of that gets me like giddy. It makes me feel excited. So like that's
sure.
one thing I'm excited about. You know, it was a really tough year for me with my grandma passing, because she was kind of my like, she was the barometer in a sense for like me. Like I guess the best way I could put it is she was the last person I was afraid to disappoint.
Hmm.
So now I feel free in the sense where it's like I don't think that I can disappoint anybody else. The only person would have been me, and I've already done that,
Hmm.
and I've already got over that, and now that's not possible anymore. I can't disappoint myself again. So
Sure.
I think that for me, it's like it is actually trying to inch towards that freedom that we talked about earlier, but
Hmm.
like this time in my way.
Right.
And so I'm excited about that. I'm excited about figuring that out. Like, can I make money making music? I don't know how much money I'll make for my books. I don't know. Like, but like, can I go on a book tour? I don't have any
Sure.
idea, but I'm excited about the prospects of like whatever the future may hold in terms of getting me closer to being able to wake up and like not have to do things I don't want to do.
Sure.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
goal.
That is a great goal. I also love traveling, so I completely can understand your giddiness about experiencing places and going to different places to try great food.
Yeah.
Totally get that. Um, I had one last question for you before we kind of close things up. How did you come up with the name of your book? And can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So there's a few prongs to the name. I would say that the most poignant probably is that I had a very strained relationship with God for a long time, um,
Mm-hmm.
and I was on the full spectrum from like there were times where I fully dependent and believing in God to like not sure if you're there,
Mm-hmm.
and I lived all the way on that spectrum, and so when I was homeless, I faced a lot of moments where it's like I don't know if I'm the puppet or the puppeteer here.
Mm-hmm.
And I had lived my life according to like for so long. Like when you're successful or whatever people they consider successful, it seems like it can seem like you're the one being the architect of those steps. You're the
Mm.
one making those things happen, and like you start to kind of get this like momentum and feeling that you can predict the future. So if I do A and B, then I'm going to get C in 6 months, you know? And then like when I was homeless, there was none of that. And then I didn't want to be responsible for what was coming now. So like I didn't want to play God at that time,
Sure.
you know? And so like it made me ask a lot of questions. So this book was in part like I made a place for those conversations that I had to have with myself about my spirituality and my religion, um,
Mm-hmm.
making a place to like talk to God again, right? And then
Mm.
also just like I mentioned earlier, just a place to talk about the tough topics, the things I was curious about that I didn't feel that there were any safe spaces in my life at the time to talk about because I had burned the bridges and I had let the people down and I was scared to face them again. So I that's kind of where I came up with the title I Made a Place for You.
Mm-hmm. Where are you at right now with those conversations with God?
That uh great question. Um they're going. I would say they're going and I I stopped believing that I was the one making the chess moves,
Mm.
a long time ago. And I think that at that point
Mm.
when I stopped believing that I had to like face the mirror and say, if it's not me, all the roads end up back at God,
Mm.
no matter how you cut the cake. So
Mm.
I had to have that conversation and say like, is prayer a tool I can use now? Because for a long time I didn't want to pray.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Right. And so like, is that something that can, and that's a simple, like I had to have an entire mindset shift to even ask myself if I was allowed to pray.
Mm.
Right.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so like, I think that like, if you can really grasp how far those two things are from each other, as
Mm-hmm.
close as they may seem, the action of actually praying was very
Oh yeah.
far from the thought of it, you
Sure.
Mm.
know? And
Mm.
so that's just a small example, but
Mm.
I would say that we have a healthier relationship. We are in communication. God and I.
That's a good thing. Both of us are believers, and we are both Christians, and we're pretty open about it throughout our podcast too. So it's
Yeah.
always interesting when people bring up their spirituality and their beliefs, and we have it's open. Our podcast is open to anybody, but just for the two of us, we're Christians, and so it's just it's cool to see people's adventures through finding God and rediscovering and losing and kind of falling back and just like really finding that firm foundation that you need and like rooting and knowing that God, like you said, God is at the end of all roads. He's still there and he's still always with you. So um,
Mm-hmm.
it's
And it
really,
was
really
funny.
cool.
This might be interesting for you guys if you want to go on a little tangent.
Sure, go for it.
I
We're
remember,
notorious for that.
I remember the moment when I started. So I was baptized when I was 11 in a Baptist church.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I remember when I was probably like 19 or 20, and I started to feel guilty because I wasn't sure if, like, I wanted to know if I could take it back, or I
Oh
wasn't
wow.
sure if I was actually ready at
Mm-hmm.
11 when I gave my life to Christ, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I remember the feeling I had at the church when the day I decided to go to the altar call, and like I was crying, and I felt the I really felt it. I still remember that I was with my stepmom's brother, who was my best friend at the time, and we were the same age, and we both did it the same day.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Um, but like later in life, I just kept wondering, like, would I rather have had an opportunity to do that later after I'd like felt more life, and like after I had, because now it's like I remember thinking like I knew that I was saved, but I didn't feel saved in some of those moments,
Mm.
Mm.
like later in life, and it
Yeah.
was
Right.
challenging to me when I had to go back and like re-spark that conversation with
Right.
God,
Mm-hmm.
because like I didn't know what happened, and I had trouble processing what happened
Yeah.
for a while. So
Makes
Yeah,
a
that's
I
ton
would
of
love to know what you
sense.
guys think
Yeah.
about that. Yeah, what do you
No,
guys
that's
think
a
about that?
huge question because a lot of people, not a lot of people, so the church that I am currently at, they do not do infant baptisms. It is a choice. And they have only, I don't know what they did before. I've been there for about 5 years now. They would do like teens and older. And they've only recently started to do some younger children because of that very point. It's saying, okay, does this 6-year-old really know that this is what they want, or is it something that they see as an expectation? It's an interesting thing to think about. I grew up in a Catholic church. I was baptized as an infant. I
Yeah,
slept through the whole thing. I didn't
right.
have a choice. I was in a pretty dress and I was asleep. So, which I think is hilarious. What baby is asleep while cold water is dripped all over her face? But that's beyond the
Mhm.
point. But thinking about that choice and saying that no matter what, the answer to that question is Jesus loves you And he loves you if you feel worthy to be baptized and if you don't feel worthy to be baptized. Either
Mm-hmm.
way, he has still made a place for you, Damian, and he is
Mm-hmm.
ready for you at any moment in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that was
Yeah.
a tough realization.
Mm-hmm.
It is really hard, and I think it's always a journey spiritually for anybody, regardless of that. It's God doesn't force us to follow Him and to be to worship Him and to love Him. Like He it is just an open hand and open heart to us, and it's an invitation for us, and it's whether or not we want to accept that. So in moments, I know in my life that I've felt like, where are you, God? You're not even here. Like, are you even paying attention? I really could, throw me a bone, please. Like, I need your help. I need something. Or moments in my life that I felt so far from Him. And I think what I've realized, and kind of what it sounds like you're starting to kind of process through just based on what you've shared, is that you've still come back to, yes, He was there. And those moments of things that you've learned, maybe you strayed a little bit, the parable or in the story of the prodigal son, where he just walks away. But then when he comes back, everybody rejoices, like, yes, he's home. And it's the same kind of concept. A lot of us as Christians, we just naturally kind of gravitate towards the world and want to make our own decisions, and that's just part of who we are. And we can go on this tangent further, of course. I can just talk on it forever, but it's just, when you come back to that place of like, no, I'm here, like I'm safe, I am loved, I'm wanted by God, you start to then realize either moments where we as humans have messed up and have sent and have sinned and fallen short. Of course, like that's biblical. Like it's going to happen. But the fact that
Mm-hmm.
God has called us home and called us back to Him, and always repeats. We can stray again and still come back, and God will still love us and still want us there. So it sounds like that's kind of how your story really went, where it was like you had that moment, and that moment when you were 11 years old was real. That moment happened, and those feelings were real, and the dwelling of the Holy Spirit, like coming within you, is like very real. And then to go into the life that you lived, as far as the homelessness and just those ambitions and those achievements that you put so heavily stressed on yourself, even in those moments, God was with you. I mean, if you didn't have that moment of your back literally against the wall, that life flash before you, would you have been able to write that poem that may impact somebody? And so it's like those moments that God can use that are terrifying for us, but can really just help us and kind of grab us. And then when we realize that, it's like that poem and that book that you wrote, and those futuristic goals that you have of being in an art gallery and reading your poetry, the impact that could have on someone else, can be huge. And it can be used in this way, that at those moments where you didn't feel saved and you didn't feel safe, God was still there and was like, watch what I can do with your story, And so I don't want to be preaching at you. Let me just like back off of my little tangent. But
I was gonna say, get this woman a microphone and a crowd.
but like, it's
Hey, I
true,
invited this tangent.
Yeah, you did. That's true. All right. So I'm gonna blame you for this. But it's so true, because even coming on our podcast, like that's part of what our podcast goals and aspirations and dreams are, for people to come on here and use this story of like a rocky road, a rocky journey, a tough journey, to impact other people, to know that, I'm sure that there's somebody some point in this podcast's life that will listen to your story and be like, I chose homelessness. And I was, and like the impact and the familiarity that they will be able to feel, knowing that you also chose that. And that was not an easy decision. And that was a really, really difficult journey for you to go through, and scary. That may bring them that peace. And so you just really never know what's going to come of what happens to you in your life. And I think it's amazing that you're still out like sharing in the poetry and the music and all of the things that you're doing. Is like, that is huge impacts that can all be used for the good of God and for His glory. And so, it's exciting to see that happen. So I'll just leave my little preach moment there. That's my TED Talk for the week. Take what you want from it, and just go from there. So we can cut that part out if we need to.
No, I love it.
Thing staying in.
Yeah, and I was gonna say too that I had to stop like looking for like Jesus highlight reels too. Like for
Mm.
me,
Oh
I
yeah.
had to go back to like, why did Jesus weep?
Yep.
Like
Mm.
why? Like because for me, it's like I feel like my religious conversations a lot of times were like, Jesus loves you, and you know that He has your
Mm-hmm.
back, and He's always going to be there, regardless. But like I had forgot about the passion part.
Sure.
You
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
I had forgot about the hard road and all of like one of my favorite rap lines is he says that like Jesus didn't just hang with the lawyers and the doctors. Like he's
Yeah.
talking about, he was like hanging out with the saint with more than just the saints, right? He was with the
Oh yeah,
sinners.
for
Mm.
sure.
And so like
Oh yeah.
I can't remember the exact line, or else I would have I would tell you. But like the gist is that like you have to get to the bad stuff, like you said, the gritty
Mhm.
stuff earlier, like getting to that. And like for me, I had to go back to parts of that with religion. Like I want to hear like gritty parts about God again, and the gritty
Mm.
parts about Jesus again, Jesus' story again, because that was the part of it that was gonna make me feel solace in that moment versus just hearing the glory and the goodness of God. I didn't want to hear that at the
Sure.
time
Yeah. Oh
because
yeah, of
Mhm.
course.
I had experienced a wrath. And if I'm going to be
Mm-hmm.
frank, at the time I blamed God for part of it.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
that was
Yeah.
me also acknowledging, that was me in my acknowledgement that there was a God. And
Right.
like
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
now those same things that like I would have blamed God for back then, I'm thankful for now, like you said. Like
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I understand that like I had to go through that time period so that I could emerge as a better person,
Mm.
as
Right.
a person who has something more thoughtful and considerate to offer to people.
Right.
So
Mhm. There are two really important parts of that you just said is that, um, and I can't remember exactly the words either, but basically Jesus surrounded himself with the worst people.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Intentionally. And that's something that personally it's been, like I don't surround myself with the worst people, but people question some of my connections. And I say, if I only connected myself to the people who already thought that they were good and holy, would I be doing any good in the world? I need to be spreading that. If I'm surrounding myself with people who know the message, who know the word, who know the hope, I would stagnate. And so you really have to get out there in the world and talk to non-believers and talk to people and just show them the love and
yeah,
the peace and the patience. Don't always have patience, but I do my best.
Yeah. Me
Um,
neither.
and just be able to kind of trickle in and plant those seeds of goodness around there. And you can have some really good times and really good conversations with people who are questioning. And
Mm-hmm.
that brings me to the second point is that you're right. By blaming him and by being mad at him, I think being mad at God is the ultimate form of trust in him, because you don't shout and scream at anger at someone unless you trust that they're not going to run away, or unless you're trying to make them run away and you're saying, are you still going to be there? And so
Mm-hmm.
being angry and blaming and being so upset with God about what he has, quote, done, that is the ultimate form of saying, okay, I know you're there, prove it. We had a guest
Mm-hmm.
way in episode 1. He said, prove it to me. And my
Mm-hmm.
goodness, go back and listen to his, because he did, and he has proved himself to him time and
Mm-hmm.
I
time and time
remember
again.
I was going to tell you, I remember telling my mom that I know that God's real because I met the devil.
Mm,
Mm. Wow.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, there's
That about sums
true
it up.
darkness. Oh,
And also, I'm thinking like, how do you tie a bow on this little tangent? Is like a majority of our entire conversation has been surrounded by emotions, and who has felt every single emotion known to man and has been able to show us how to display that emotion righteously. And we always mess up, but who is that person? And it was Jesus. And, he was the one that has, as a man, Jesus was a man, like cried and got angry and loved people and did all those things and literally met the devil himself too. It's like in
mm,
those dark moments, we can relate to him because he was there too in those moments on when he walked on earth here. And, that's so true. It's like you find I fully believe you find God in the darkness and in the darkest places
mm,
because you just see true evil and true hurt and real deep pain that you can't explain in any other way. And the only way you can get out of that is by the help of God. So, nice little tangent we went on there. So that was great. Great. Good little one. Doesn't always happen for sure in all of our episodes, but definitely well worth it. So, to just kind of close
now that we're all sweating.
Yeah, right. We're all sweating. Our hearts are like racing. We're like, oh my gosh. Right. We're all ready to be baptized again. To kind of wrap up like our time here and just talk about it, we ask all of our guests to pick a song, and my goodness, I'm sure you have probably 50 that you could pick because of your music selection and your music background. So if you could just share with us the song that you choose that either summarizes point in your life or your life as a whole, and share with us what that song is so we can add it to our Spotify playlist, the Rocky Road playlist that anybody can check out. So you tell us.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. For somebody that loves music to pick one song is...
Listen, full disclosure, I always pick 2 for my episodes, so it's fine if you do 2.
You can pick 2 if you need to. It's fine.
All right, so I'm gonna pick 2, and they're fairly they're different. So one of them is gonna be Stevie Wonder Visions.
Okay.
Oh wow.
From his Inner Visions album, and the other one is gonna be my song that I just put out last month, which is called "Be Up" by D.White, D.White. And I'm picking that because I wrote that song while my grandmother was in hospice. And it's about being up late at night, trying to figure your life out. And it's clean. So that's good.
We have explicit songs in the playlist too, so don't worry about that.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, both of those should pass the inspection either way.
Sure.
But yeah, the Stevie Wonder song is really important to me because I was watching an interview about him, and I never really put together the concept of somebody without vision explaining to you the beauty of something visually, right? So like the guy was describing how Stevie Wonder is painting this beautiful picture of this like field of grass and all this stuff in these songs, and I was like, I never really thought about, like, he's never even seen grass,
right?
To be able to describe it in such a majestic, beautiful, aesthetically relatable way. I really fell in love with like that song and that album recently again. So that's why I picked both those.
I love that. And I'm excited I was about to ask you if there's an album of yours that we can support too. So I'm excited so you're on Spotify? Are you on Apple Music? Are you on YouTube?
Both. There's a video for that song on YouTube. Yeah. On YouTube,
awesome.
There's a video and I can send it to you. But no album yet. I made music before in 2000. I started in 2014, and then I really put out some stuff in 2018. But like that stuff now is like, it doesn't fit me. You know, it's
right.
that was back when I was still trying to figure out who everyone else wanted me to be. So like these songs, and like that song in particular, I think is the first one that really captures kind of the essence of like where I'm going. So the video is cool. Hopefully you check it out.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
We want to support you. We want to be in your corner and watch you blossom into these poetry reading, art gallery attending, concert, rap show, concert people, everything that you are trying to be. So how can people connect with you? How can they find you?
Absolutely. So I'm on Instagram as Damian K. White. So at DAMIAN K. White. My website is DamianWhiteWrites.com. So it should be easy to remember. And
sure.
you can find my Instagram and my book, and I'm selling some hoodies and stuff. I have a book trailer on there and book reviews and things like that if you want to kind of like learn more about the book before making a purchase. Otherwise, that's TikTok. Damian KY on TikTok too.
Perfect. There you go. All the ways, we'll have them in our show notes. Everybody can follow you there. So thank you so much, Damian, for chatting with us today and our nice little tangent that took us over an hour, but it's all worth it. So that's perfect. So we really appreciate your time and just the time that we were able to chat and to hear your story. And we're just really grateful for you being that mouthpiece for people of homelessness to be able to share what you've gone through and how that's impacted your life and how to overcome a lot of that. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And hopefully that I can come talk about the second book and tell a completely different story.
Perfect.
Yes, we're excited for part 2. Beautiful. All right, Rocky Roadsters. Thanks for hanging.